He was on that island. He was on the jets. Those jets were remodeled to have a lot of bedrooms. That was the entire way. They were gutted inside and then bedrooms. They were places to traffic girls. So he saw things that were going on. And if he cares so deeply about this, he could share that information with investigators. This is what happened. Let me validate their experience.
Amy, first of all, I wonder whether you can tell us how much time you spent with Virginia Giuffre putting this book together.
We knew each other for a little over 4 years. We met for the first time on Zoom, much like this, in April of 2021. And we spent 4 years working very closely with each other. I met her for the first time in person in June. The book begins there, actually. I am not in it, but I was there in Paris. She had gone to Paris on her own dime, bought her own ticket, paid for her own hotel in order to help prosecutors in France keep Jean-Luc Brunel in prison, or in jail. He was awaiting a trial and he was trying to get out on bail. And she flew to give testimony about what he had done to her and what he had done to others that she had witnessed. Um, and we realized, since I lived in California, she lived in Australia, Western Australia, that it was actually easier for us to meet in Paris for the first time. So we met there. We spent time in New York together. And then I lived with the family in Australia 2 different times, so adding up to almost a month. The most recent time being last October.
So you are a journalist of some renown. You're award-winning as a reporter. This is a very painstakingly researched book, isn't it? There are details that you haven't been able to include in the book that perhaps you might have wanted to include. Everything that is in here has been double, triple checked. We can rely on it all, can we?
Well, we were very careful for obvious reasons, and I should maybe back up and say why. Not all memoirs are fact-checked. They are the memories of the person writing, and the reader accepts that and sort of accepts that it's just my version. In this case, obviously, she had been through so much, and much of what she had experienced, especially during the years when she was being abused by Epstein and Maxwell, involved being trafficked to some of the most wealthy and powerful men in the world. Um, so we knew the book had to be even more airtight than I like to keep everything, which is I try to be careful and get everything accurate in every piece that I do, whether it's for magazines or books. Um, so I think that probably was one of the reasons that she hired me. I've been a journalist for more than 30 years. I've worked at newspapers, magazines. I've written 2 other collaborative books. Um, and I know how to report. I know how to do my own research. So not only did I have a full set of all of the publicly available records, which I had painstakingly put into 3-ring binders in ways that I could figure out and find where I wanted what I needed. I charted the entire 24 or so months that she was in Maxwell and Epstein's orbit. That was on the wall, month by month, and I had double checked whereabouts of everybody that I could figure out where they were at all times, so that we didn't mistakenly tell you that Ghislaine Maxwell was in London when she was actually at a party in New York. And helpfully, celebrity photography can help you chart a lot of those whereabouts, because her picture was taken a lot, not so much Epstein, but definitely Maxwell. But then I also reported around Virginia. She was incredibly forthcoming, and her memory was startlingly accurate. But I only know that. I'm not taking her word for it. I checked it. And over and over again, she would tell a story. It might even sound outlandish, or like, how could this possibly be true? This young girl was at a party on a yacht, and for a model's 30th birthday. And then sometimes we got help from, again, celebrity photographers who were at the party, and these photos would surface. There's a famous one of Virginia looking very, very young in the foreground, sort of the back of Ghislaine's side of her face, lurking nearby on this same party that Virginia had told me about. So we were very careful. I talked to all of her family, people that had known her when she was in the clutches of Epstein and Maxwell, what she had said contemporaneously. The charge often made of somebody writing a book that makes any sort of charges is, they're just doing this to make money to write a book. She had told people these things when she was still a teenager. So we were as careful as we could be, and then we also hired a professional fact checker. So
Right.
we had belt and suspenders.
Yeah, got it. I'm really glad that you mentioned that image of Virginia at the age of 17 at a party for Naomi Campbell. Anybody who looks at that photograph, effectively, it is a crime scene, isn't it? Because you can see, as you say, the waif-like figure of this teenager surrounded by ultra sophisticates, at least a decade or more older than her.
At
Nobody,
least. Yeah.
nobody called it out. No one.
Yeah. No, there's a scene in the book about that picture, um, where another victim comes forward and tells her, I came forward. I saw you in that picture. There was no question. That was a child. And that was Virginia. So it's something that we make clear in the book, but Virginia didn't just bravely stand up against others who had abused her. She also inspired other victims who
Yeah.
had been hurt and were terrified, just like Virginia was. But they were like, well, if she can do it, maybe I can. And Virginia's not the only brave victim. There are so many who have come forward and attempted to keep this, the light being shined on these crimes.
But she paid a savage price for her courage in coming forward. And it is clear in the book that her physical health is really compromised. And obviously, so is her mental health. And we now know that tragically she took her own life in the April of this year. Did Can I just ask you how you found out about that and how you felt about it?
Well, it was a Friday morning, California time. There's a very, very tight team of people who have been working on this book, or involved in Virginia's life for years. And we were all in very close touch and keeping track. Have you talked to her? Have you talked to her? Making sure she was okay. What did you hear the last time? And one of those people just called me and she said, Virginia's gone. And I said, what do you mean? You know, and she said, she's dead. Um, and I was shocked, which readers of the book may wonder about that. Virginia was adamant that we talk about and acknowledge her, herself as a woman in full, her highs and her lows. And we acknowledge in the book that she had attempted to kill herself before. So on the one hand, I knew that she had this sort of wolf at the door, this voice in her head, which she described to me as saying, the world would be a better place without you in it. Basically, a voice that says you are worthless. And readers of this book will understand when they see what she went through in her entire life, not just with Epstein and Maxwell, but in previous situations as well, that you'll understand why she felt worthless at times, and
Yes, yeah.
even every day to some degree, and because she'd been treated like she had no worth over and over and over again by adults who had betrayed her. So that was there, and yet she was such a resilient, lovely woman. She had a sense of humor. She had numerous coping mechanisms, which we describe in the book. And so I was still shocked. I remain so sad. She should be the one on this podcast with you and doing this interview. This is her triumph, this book where she was bravely calling out not just the people who did it, but the part of our culture that still fetishizes young girls, and that has not died with Jeffrey Epstein or gone to prison with Ghislaine Maxwell. And frankly, just misogyny. It's anti-woman. It's women are here for our use. Girls are here for our use. It is that belief system that she was pointing her finger at. And she was doing that for all of us to make the world a better place, not just to tell her own story. Um, so
I
I'm
think
sad. I'm
I
sad that
don't want,
she's not here.
of course, I don't want to interrupt Amy, but for people who haven't read the book, you've already alluded to this, but she died at the age of 41. She says in the book that her father had sexually abused her from the age of 7. He denies this. You, I know, have talked to Virginia's mother, who, well, how can we sum up? She doesn't disbelieve the allegations that Virginia made about her father. Would that be an accurate way of describing it?
I would go further. She believes what Virginia told her, but Virginia told it to her when Virginia was an adult. I think I have talked to Lynn, Virginia's mom, at length. Um, and to her two brothers. She has one brother 5 years older, one 5 years younger. The 5 years younger brother was too young to know what was going on. The 5 years older brother was sent away to a sort of a school, a boarding school, basically. And so he wasn't around when a lot of it was happening in the house. Um, I have a lot of empathy for Virginia's mom. She um, was dealing with her own ailing mother at the time. She was working. These were not wealthy people. These were people who were getting by, and everybody was busy, and there were 3 kids in the house. It is so painful to her mom to know how hurt her daughter was under her own roof, and obviously later as well. Um, and she believed she. I asked her point blank, well, do you believe what she said? And she said, absolutely. She is no longer with Virginia's father.
Right. But to those people who will say, and honestly, I'm sure you, like I, have read comments over the last couple of days, incredibly ignorant, ill-informed remarks from people making the same old misogynist points. Why didn't they leave? Well, they were getting paid. They're no better than they ought to be. What's that other expression? Party girls.
Yeah.
How do you counter all this, Amy?
Well, I think it's part and parcel of what I was just talking about. It's misogyny. It says that if women dare to speak up, that they're liars and sluts. And uh, I guess here's how I try to explain it to people I know, and there are a lot of them, reasonable people who are like, well, if it's so bad, just leave. What you have to understand and what the book attempts to paint a picture of is that when you are a young person, a child, who is introduced to the idea that grown men rape children and they don't pay a price for it, you begin to think after a while, that's the world. That's how it works. So I just need to navigate inside that world. When you believe those things, and Virginia, as you will see, had plenty of reason to believe them, you don't think that escaping out of the front door of the Manhattan mansion or, somehow swimming, it would be impossible to swim off the island, is going to get you anywhere better. The
No.
world works like this, is what you believe. And so
Well,
you just have to navigate it. And so this idea that, and I'll go further. This book is a predator's playbook. It shows you how these people, and Maxwell was arch among them, tell these girls a really weird, deranged, mixed message that is very effective. They say, you are going to sexually service us. And Ghislaine Maxwell was just as involved in the sexual abuse as Jeffrey Epstein was. But also, we posh people see that you, an impoverished girl, have promise. You can have a wonderful life. We'll help you get it. We think you are so special. And those girls, a lot of them had not either never been told that before, or they'd not been told it enough. And
mm,
it's that that kept them there. as well as anything else because they needed that.
In this country, inevitably and rightly, the focus has been on the allegations against Prince Andrew, who continues to deny the allegations. What, apart from the fact that some of his titles have been removed or gone into abeyance, whatever the technical expression is, to be perfectly honest, Amy, it doesn't make a lot of sense to most of us in this country. How that translates to people outside the UK, I simply don't know. He does say, and he said in his statement on Friday, that he denies these allegations. So, bearing that denial in mind, what should he do now?
Well, in his settlement with Virginia, there was a lot of verbiage about how he really feels for these victims now, even though he did not express any of that empathy in his Newsnight interview with BBC.
And
But now,
nor did he say that on Friday either.
yet it was basically this idea has been expressed in his voice on paper, written by somebody, that he cares about this issue. He thinks it's an outrage. And you think, well, he probably should. He has daughters. Um, if he does care about that, I think there is more room for him to be more active. And by which I mean, this is a man. Well, let's leave aside what he does or does not admit to. He was in those houses. He was on that island. He was on the jets. Those jets were remodeled to have a lot of bedrooms. That was the entire way. They were gutted inside and then bedrooms. They were places to traffic girls. So he saw things that were going on. And if he cares so deeply about this, he could share that information with investigators. This is what happened. Let me validate their experience.
Have
Um,
have any of the other men involved done exactly that?
Not that I know of, no. In the United States, and I think that's a good point. I know we're we're going out to listeners in the UK, and Prince Andrew is obviously top of mind. This story is not about Prince Andrew. This story is about more than a dozen, if not dozens, of men, powerful men, who felt entitled to use these girls as their sexual playthings. In the case of Andrew, we know that he actually knew how young she was because there was a guessing game. It's in the book where Ghislaine makes him guess how old she is. Some of them might claim, I didn't even know how old they were. I don't care. They knew that Epstein surrounded himself with young women. That was part of the draw of coming to be with him. And there are a lot of them. And it was always Virginia's fondest wish that they be held to account. That's why in the United States there is this clamoring call to release the Epstein files, because those names I know from Virginia. I know the names that she told the FBI. I know the names that she told them repeatedly. And Virginia is just one of many women who came forward bravely and talked to investigators. And I think we don't even know all of the women because some of them did it privately and have never come forward to the public, as is their right to protect their privacy. So we do need all of us to stand up to this. We
Yeah.
need women to talk about it and men. And if
Yes,
Prince
of
Andrew would like to
course.
lead that charge, I would welcome it.
Right. So, if the truth is, though, the terrible truth, as you've indicated, is that if Prince Andrew were to come forward and describe what he saw and what he knew, he'd be the first man to actually do that. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it?
Well, I mean, of course, we all understand the concept of you are innocent until you are proven guilty. And we also understand the very basic idea that sexual abuse often happens behind a closed door, and it's often either two people involved, or maybe three, if Ghislaine Maxwell is there abusing as well, which often happened. But it's a he said, she said. And those cases, any lawyer will tell you, are difficult because what happens is the victims are always vilified or made to seem like liars or drug addicts or fill in the blank, and they're hard to win. So, what's happened so far, at least with the men that Virginia has named in depositions that are public, those men have just said, well, we deny it.
Yeah. Which brings us on, obviously, in the States, Donald Trump, who does appear briefly in Nobody's Girl, we should say, in a very brief encounter with Virginia and her father at Mar-a-Lago. Lots of people in the States believe that he is implicated in this too. Um, do you believe that the Epstein files, so called, will be made fully public in the US in the near future or at all?
Well, I have no window into that. I find it sort of mystifying that Donald Trump campaigned as one of his main planks for returning to the presidency. He campaigned on the idea that he was going to release the Epstein files, something that Virginia was felt very validated by. Um, I should say in the book there is no scene because Virginia had never seen any such scene of Donald Trump abusing young underage girls. He was not one of the many men who were in the house. He wasn't hanging around.
Yeah.
And there are several men who really were, who she knew well. There were others who were kind of would come in one or two times, but Donald Trump is not implicated in the book. Um, I mean, I think what's important to say there is that um, the reason for Donald Trump's desire to release the Epstein files was so important to Virginia and others is that, again, these women had been told for years that they were not worth listening to. They had Epstein had a sweetheart deal made behind their backs. They were not informed, and he was allowed to theoretically be imprisoned in Florida, but also leave during the day during his prison sentence and abuse young girls while he was theoretically being incarcerated. I mean, this is who's heard of this kind of thing? You and I
Well,
wouldn't get that treatment.
no, I mean it's absolutely mind-boggling that it was allowed to happen. But that's, I mean, we also need to make clear in the book that there's one credible death threat that Virginia Giuffre received. The FBI were very worried about it. They took it seriously. There were mysterious episodes when strange cars would drive up to her home and their headlights would be on full beam, blasting into the house last thing at night. She felt extraordinarily vulnerable, didn't she? She was made to feel that way again. I mean, was she right to be frightened, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't imagined paranoia. There were, as you say, the FBI alerted the family at one point that there was a credible death threat against Virginia's life. They rented a camper van in Australia and drove into the wilds of Australia and stayed there for 3 weeks. They have three kids. They were in school. They realized well, we have to go back. Like we have to, but no one was helping them. They just had to, they alerted the local authorities and said, well, this has happened. And they tried to be careful. And their house was broken into when they lived in Colorado. They, as you say, there were these very frightening incidents. She was home alone one night with her three kids sleeping. And there was a car right outside the front door aiming the headlights in. She got her dog, a big dog that they had at the time. She got the gun that she had specifically gotten for this purpose, and she just stood at the door and hoped they weren't going to come in. And they ultimately left. But this was a constant thing. And beyond that, any victim weighs the costs of coming forward. And on the plus side, you're going to hold your abuser to account, and you're going to maybe make the world a better place and teach other people we should all be standing up against this kind of behavior. We should all be saying, no, it's not okay for wealthy people to treat poor people this way. We should all be
Yeah.
doing that. So obviously that sounds great, but here's what you lose. You lose your privacy completely. You are endangered personally. And she did have people who had made clear to her that she better be quiet or else. So, and whether that was physical threats or threats of keeping her in court for the rest of her life, whether there were merits to her case or not, there are ways, if you're super wealthy, you can keep somebody in court. You can delay, delay, delay. You can depose, depose, depose. You can get all of their medical records, even ones that aren't relevant. You can pummel them with questions about their entire life,
Yeah.
thus keeping them in that same loop of repeating, 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 and they won't be able to heal. So you have
Yes.
all those things that just show you how brave Virginia was, that she continued to push on given all of those threats.
And we know too that Prince Andrew's people, whoever they might be, hired internet trolls to have a go at her. So they were part of it too. And I just think it's so important that people understand that there is a massive price to be paid for speaking up. And in the end, Virginia, the poor soul, simply couldn't tolerate it anymore. And I don't know where we go from here, really. I mean, how can we make her efforts worth it? What would you like
Well,
to happen now?
what I will just say, it would devastate Virginia if the takeaway from this book is, don't stand up because it's bad. Her goal for this book was to help other survivors of sexual abuse, be they male or female, not just Maxwell and Epstein victims, anyone who has been coerced into having sex against their will. With anyone at any point in their lives. And there are a lot of us out there, most people have never told another soul, but a lot of people have had that experience. And her goal was to say to those people through this book, I see you, I am you. And I understand the shame that you feel that you shouldn't feel. And I understand how hard it is to move through the day sometimes, how hard it is to get up in the morning, because I'm going to show you how hard it is for me. Even now, even though I'm well known and I've won settlements, I I want you to feel less alone. And if she ends the book this way, if one person feels less alone, this book is a success. So so that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, obviously we're doing a lot of interviews right now, and a lot of the worst things that she experienced are being discussed for good reason, because they're abominable and we should all be angry about it. But this isn't just a catalog of horrors. It's not just a list of names. It's a portrait of an entire complex person. It's her highs and her lows, and you also see her coping and all of her different strategies that she had worked hard to have. In some ways, the biggest triumph for this person is that she is able to love again, that she's able to trust again, and that she had a family. She has three beautiful kids who she loved out of her mind. She loved listening to music, and there's a lot of music in the book. So you have, and she also knew this was going to be a very difficult reading experience. So there are times we turn directly to the reader and we say, "Hey, look,
Well,
we know that this is a lot."
yes. Well,
So she,
I'm glad you mentioned that because I needed to hear that quite early on in the book. There is a plea in Virginia's voice saying, "You're probably feeling I've read enough now. I can't take it anymore, but please keep going." And I guess that's why it's so important, Amy, that you are doing such a great job of talking about this book. I know you have to go now, but can I just ask about your own feelings as to your own vulnerability? I mean, are you concerned that clearly people wanted to put the frighteners on Virginia? Do you think people want you to shut up?
I'm sure there are people who would like me to shut up. I mean, I've taken precautions. Certainly, I'm keeping my eyes open. Um, but the book is out there. Silencing me in whatever way that might happen won't silence it. Virginia's voice now lives on, and that is one of the real triumphs of the book. It, I'm proud to have been involved in it. I am honored to be speaking on her behalf. I wish she was talking to you right now. This is her triumph. I was her helpmate in getting it done. Um, but it's important. And I guess what I would say is, victims out there, don't stop coming forward if you can. And I'm not going to be quiet. You're not going to be quiet. We all need to be talking about this. What's going on in our culture globally that treats women as less than? And that is alive and well. It didn't die with Epstein.
Amy, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it, and congratulations on what's such an important book. Thank you.